There's something almost every salon owner has said at some point, but very few ever question it. Maybe you've said it out loud, maybe you've only said it in your head. I just need to get motivated again. And what's interesting is when that sentence shows up, it usually follows, a slower than expected week or a heavier payroll than you wanted or a team issue that took more energy than it should have, or a plan you genuinely meant to follow through on. And in that moment, it feels logical, responsible, even, but what if that sentence isn't helping you at all? What if the belief that you need motivation is actually the thing holding you back? Before we go any further, we want to say this clearly. If you've ever felt unmotivated, there's nothing wrong with you. But there is something wrong with the way motivation has been sold to salon owners.
Lindsay, I feel like our industry just loves motivation. We
Mhm.
see the motivational speakers, the motivational quotes, the motivational Mondays. And if you think about it, I feel like the message is kind of always the same. Like, if you want it bad enough, you'll do it. Right. And so
Yeah.
then you say that. And then when something doesn't happen, what do we assume in that moment? It's like, well, we didn't want it enough, or, you weren't disciplined enough, or we weren't strong enough. And slowly, without even realizing it, that motivation turns into a weapon that we actually use against ourselves. So, think about this. Instead of asking what system broke, we ask, what's wrong with me? And this is what we call the motivation trap. Nothing moves unless you feel ready. Nothing happens unless the energy is here. And leadership gets postponed until emotions cooperate.
Yeah. Jen, here's the truth that most people never say out loud: motivation is emotional, and emotions are inconsistent, which means motivation is the worst thing to build a business on, because motivation spikes at the beginning, January, new hires, new goals, new ideas. But real leadership doesn't happen at the beginning. It happens on ordinary Tuesdays, when nothing feels urgent, when no one is watching, when there's no emotional payoff. And that's where most systems fail, because there is no system. There's also a universal principle at play here, one most business owners were never taught. If you've hung out with us for any amount of time at all, you've probably heard about it before. It's called the law of entropy, and it simply just means without structure, everything moves toward disorder. Not because you failed, not because you lacked discipline, but because that's how reality works. It's just like the law of gravity. You can't decide you don't like the law of gravity and then gravity no longer exists. Nope. You're going to come crashing down. The same thing is true with the law of entropy, because motivation doesn't fight entropy, structure does.
Mm. So think about this, salon owners. How many times have you said, you know, I'll start this when things slow down, or like I'll train the team when I have more energy, or like I'll organize this when I'm in the right headspace? Because at that moment, motivation becomes the gatekeeper. But here's the problem, you guys, is waiting to feel motivated is the same as waiting to feel safe. And growth doesn't require safety. It actually requires structure. Lindsay, you were just telling me about a team member who wasn't selling retail. When I said that, it reminded me of your story you shared with me. You shared with me the other day. Do you mind telling that?
Yeah, I mean, really, Jen, how this came up with us is that really we were just talking about, like, if we are solely relying on motivation. So, I was talking to this team member. I know you and I have had this conversation before. Like, it's like you have growth session with somebody, where you look at what's going on with their numbers, and kind of talk about a plan to move forward. But, she shared with me that she didn't feel like and like offering retail or feel like something. I can't even remember what her exact words were around. She didn't feel like doing something, but truly that's what motivation is. And that's why it's key when we're in those growth sessions to role play your system around offering retail and asking guests the right question. That's the key here. And so instead of it being, this isn't an emotional, like, hey, when we feel like offering retail or selling retail, that's when we're going to do it. No, we love our guests so much here that we have a system built around it. So it removes the emotion totally. And it also removes the motivation totally. As the salon owner, you're not here to try to motivate someone. No, you're just like, hey, obviously our numbers are telling the story that we're not offering retail in the way that we do here. So go, check out the $1 Million Beauty Pro portal, get caught up on a couple of great retail videos, come back to me, tell me what you learned, do a little role playing with them, and it's amazing to see what unlocks. And when they can see themselves as somebody who's not just selling retail, they're serving, and it's not an emotional thing, and they don't need the motivation, it's just a system. Man, it it just gives them so much back, and the guest in return.
That's so good. It sure does. Because I think about this, like every time you ask yourself if you're going to do the thing that you said you were going to do, like you spend energy before the work even begins. Like, and when you think about that, that becomes decision fatigue. You're just constantly trying to make decisions and you get tired doing it. And most salon owners aren't burned out from doing too much. They're exhausted for deciding too much. Can I get an amen as many times as we've heard that from salon owners? Like they're exhausted from deciding too much.
Yeah, it's like the 15th phone call that you get for that month asking for a donation. You're like, "Oh my goodness, I just don't even wanna answer this anymore?"
Take
But
me, I'll donate me, whatever you need.
exactly. I'm your girl. I'm coming. Oh, so good. And here's the lie. The lie is that motivation creates momentum. It doesn't. Momentum creates motivation. It's like if you get up out of bed and put your shoes on in the morning, you're more likely to go to the gym or go for the run or whatever your goal is. It's not like, hey, I need to get motivated and then I'm going to get up and put the shoes on. No, that momentum creates motivation. People don't feel motivated and then act. They act and then the motivation shows up. Here's why. The word motivation comes from the Latin movere, meaning to move, not to feel, not to think, not to hype yourself up, to move, which means motivation isn't the cause of action. It's the result of it. Because motion is emotion. It's motion and movement. People don't feel motivated and then act. They act and then the feeling follows. But only when the action is simple, repeatable, already decided. That's why hustle works temporarily. It forces movement, but structure works permanently. It actually just totally removes decision fatigue. Picture motivation like fireworks. It's loud, it's exciting, it's short lived. But now picture structure like electricity. It's quiet, always on. It's running everything, even when you're asleep. Motivation is rented, but structure is owned. It makes me think about Jen. We were just talking about, um, I know we just had epic salon celebrations this month. I know you actually just had a really cool story about, I think just so many salon owners think, hey, when I'm going to have a meeting, I got to go over these things. I got to try to get them motivated. But there's a totally different way to view it. And I know, our salon owners inside of the salon owner code or inner circle, or even if you're just getting the salon success calendar, you already know our view on salon celebrations and how, they're meant to help our teams create more money. Because when they're creating more money, we know that they're implementing the right systems. But Jen, you just did the wig, um,
Mhm.
the fun salon celebration today. And you actually had a really fun story about that.
Yeah, and if you have access to a Salon Success calendar, like Lindsay
Mhm.
was saying, you read this, and so one thing we really help shaping is the identity shift for our teams and for the industry to shift from hairstylist to beauty pro. So, hairstylist literally just does hair, perms, cuts, colors, but a beauty pro, beauty means good, pro means forward, so they're literally moving good forward. And so we wanted to show people the power that when you're a beauty pro, actually transform people's looks, right? And so we thought it would be fun. It really actually was a lot of fun to actually wear wigs. So show up as wigs. So, Lindsay and I are both blonde. I think Lindsay had the ideal pixie. Okay. If you didn't see it, you missed out. So she had this really amazing pixie go on. Well, my head's really small, so the wig that fit the best was a bob. Okay, a beveled bob at that with some bangs. Okay, definitely a different look for me. And so we have our kickoff party. We call it our first salon celebration at a meeting space just to get outside of our environment a little bit. And so I show up this morning with my natural hair, or, what I usually wear, my blonde, or what I usually have, not wear, but what I usually have is my blonde. And the girl at the front desk, she was so kind. She's like, hey, whatever you need, I'm here. Like, let me know how I can help you. I was like, this is great. This is so good. So then I had to get in costume before the team got there. So, I put my wig on, and this is the bob, the little angled bob with the bangs, right? And it's brown. I mean, it is rich, rich brown. And so I go back up to the front desk and I'm like, hey, is there any way we can get like a knife and some napkins? And it was like, she didn't even know. She was like, yeah, over there. And I was like, wow, what happened? This is the same person. What happened to the person that when I checked in with my blonde hair? And it was just so powerful, like, maybe that haircut triggered her and she thought of somebody that she went to school with that had that same haircut, and she's like, "Oh, not today. You ain't getting nothing from me today." But I just thought it was such a great story to tell my team. So then we all got to try on wigs and have fun with it, and then to really truly see how a wig can transform someone's look and then translate that back to that's what we get to do every single day. And so I just share that story. It was just a really interesting moment how much power we have. And I could have stood up there at that salon celebration and talked about, you guys, let's get motivated. Let's give clients the hair of their dreams. We
Mhm.
actually got to experience that through putting wigs on each other, through doing some face shape analysis through a game. And it was just really incredible and such a fun time.
I love that, Jen, and it's not saying like, hey, that it was the blonde power.
Yeah,
What the power was you being in your full identity as
absolutely.
Jen and helping people have that outward expression. I did the same salon celebration about a week ago, and I actually posted the picture on my story on Instagram and Facebook, and I had over 150 messages, like DMs about it. And, I'm not used to getting 150 messages after one post. It was like Jen mentioned me in a pixie cut, and people were just losing their minds. And I think it was uh, there was so many wonderful comments, and a couple that were like, yikes, I hope this isn't for real. But that's, like Jen mentioned, how powerful hair is and how powerful identity is. And when your team understands the power that they hold in their hands, and how to translate that to our guests, this is where the identity shift happens. Because wh- when you'll always act in alignment with who you believe you are, because an example of this would be like a person who is a runner doesn't debate running. They run, and A person who is a leader doesn't wait to lead, they lead. And you guys, I'm talking beyond hair now. Hair is like what we get to do at the salon celebrations in our daily lives, but how you see yourself, how you view your identity makes all the difference, because it's just like a person who is a professional. They don't negotiate standards, they keep them. So instead of asking, how do I get more motivated, reframe it to, who do I need to become so this behavior is natural? That's identity work. You're not someone who needs to get motivated. You're someone who builds environments that work even when motivation disappears. That's leadership. That's who you are.
Mhm.
The word discipline comes from the word disciple, and a disciple doesn't wait to feel inspired. A disciple follows away. Leadership isn't emotional obedience, it's structural obedience. At some point, every successful leader makes this decision. I don't do things based on how I feel. I do things based on who I've decided to be. You decide once, and the system carries it forward.
Mm. So good. And you guys, this is why we believe so deeply in the salon success calendar, not as a planner, not as another thing to keep up with, but as a decision removal system called the DRS, the decision removal system. It doesn't rely on hype, it doesn't rely on energy, it doesn't rely on mood. It actually gives you rhythm. So instead of asking, what do I have the energy for today? You get to ask, what's already decided for this month? And when that happens, suddenly training happens, communication improves, progress becomes predictable. Not because you're more motivated, but because fewer things are actually up for debate. You know, at the end of the day, it's not about doing more, it's about protecting your energy by letting structure do the heavy lifting.
Yeah. So if motivation has ever made you feel behind, this is your permission slip to let it go. You don't need more inspiration. You don't need another quote. You don't need to try harder. You need fewer decisions, clearer priorities, and a structure that supports the leader you already are. And when motivation shows up, great. But when it doesn't, your business still moves forward.
So, if you want support creating that kind of structure, you can explore the Salon Success Calendar and see if it fits the way you want to lead this year. And next week, we're going to be talking about something that no one warns salon owners about. It's why working harder has never been the answer. What? Isn't that crazy? Why working harder has never been the answer, and what actually creates sustainable momentum. We'll see you next week.